Stir Crazy on the Real News Network. This is the show we made so we wouldn't go crazy. With our hosts, Jacqueline Luqman, Tunde Ogunfolaju, Marc Steiner, and myself, Charles Lenchner. This is the Real News Network's latest show, and we'd love your feedback. Let us know why you're here and what's on your mind today. Are we helping you survive another day in isolation? I will let all you guys know that I had to get a root canal today. And I'm glad that there was a lot less traffic going back and forth to the dentist. And he advised me that to stay out of pain, I should take some serious medication. So we're going to have a poll at the end of the show. Do you think I took the medication or if I'm in terrible pain?
I'm going to vote yes immediately. I don't know. I don't know if voting.
You look medicated.
Already,
you sound medicated.
Hey, first of all,
every day, Mark.
First of all, can we get a round of applause for Charles for still showing up after getting a root canal? That's dedication there. I tell you what. But if your mouth starts bleeding at any point during this, I'm out. All right, just letting you know that.
What about you, Tunde? How's it been going for you?
It's been going good. I've learned a lot about myself in these past few days. I've learned that I actually thrive in situations where I don't actually have to come into physical contact with anybody else. So I'm doing quite all right. Not too bad. I've also figured out that I hate any and all challenges that get presented online. I will not do any, and I refuse to. Just out of principle, really, because I just think that they're stupid, even though I know that they're, make people feel like there's a sense of community and all that good stuff. But I have no desire to do anything of that sort. Also, I figured out that I actually do like to exercise because it actually does make me feel better. I've exercised the last few days, and it's made me less. It makes me feel better about myself, that I'm not just sitting down all day and sitting in front of a computer screen. So I think that's where I'm at right now.
Thank you. How about you, Jacqueline?
Well, as you see, I'm here with my husband, Abdi Shahid. And it's I've been in isolation for 2 weeks. He's still going out to work. He's a truck driver, so he's by himself a lot of the day. So we're both kind of loners. We always were. So we were like we were like, oh, great. We don't have to hang out with other people. We never wanted to do that anyway. So so I mean, it's been interesting to have to do it because to protect your health and to protect the health of other people. So now you're having to think a lot about how close you are to people and stuff like that. But trust me, we watch enough television, and Netflix is our friend, and we love Amazon Prime with the movies and everything there is to know about vampires, zombies, any kind of apocalypse, and World War II.
Was that before or after the isolation?
Huh?
Did you know all that before or after isolation? In terms of the vampires?
We knew it before isolation. Now we've got the finer points down. But what were you about to say?
You missed out one thing. I mean, we discovered Russian horror movies.
Oh yeah. That's been the plus. We discovered Russian horror movies.
Yep.
They're amazing.
Russian horror movies.
Russian horror
yes.
movies. Yep.
Yes.
Are they vastly different than other horror movies?
It depends on which one you choose.
Where might you find said Russian horror?
Yeah, where are they?
On Amazon Prime, and if you search
it would be on Amazon
Russian horror movies, it's like you search Russian horror movies and it takes a long time for the movies to load because it's like the people I know it's not people who are loading the movies, but if you could just imagine like an old movie theater or walking into a Blockbuster. I know most people don't know what the heck Blockbuster is anymore. But walking into a Blockbuster and asking for, Russian horror movies, and the clerk behind the counter going, "What? Do we have those? Somebody wants those?" So yeah,
Yeah, they got to go in that room that's covered with cobwebs and stuff.
Yeah, out of the attic. Yeah,
Yep.
So that's been a lot of fun. And
Well, when you finish those, Jacqueline, try Icelandic horror movies.
oh,
Wow.
okay,
All right, Mark,
Really good filmmakers.
okay,
you-
that's a
your
bet.
turn. Go ahead. Aside from the Icelandic movies, how you doing?
I haven't watched an Icelandic film in a while, but I'm doing okay. I mean, we live out in the country, and I'm holed up out here, and we're holed up out here, and I'm cooking a lot, and we stay in these chats with different family groups, and it's fine. I'm doing all my interviews from right here, where I'm sitting now, and so as my grandfather would say, it could be voice. Watch it now. It could be voice.
You're the
So
only one.
here we are. Huh?
You're the only one on the show who has a cabin in the woods. When it comes to horror movies, I think we all know what that means.
Yeah, it's pretty ominous.
So we're going to get on with the business of making fun of our grim reality here. And what that means today is, am I allowed to say this online? The fuckery starts early with the corporate bailout.
You can say whatever you like online.
It's YouTube. Nobody cares.
Fair enough. The main issue here with the story, and I'm throwing this over to Tunde to start with, is that this is a story about how our government is writing a check for $2 trillion and then putting in the fine print, by the way, the General Accounting Office isn't allowed to have oversight over how this money is spent, which seems like if you were looking for a piece of evidence suggesting that someone somewhere is thinking of how to steal a bunch of money, that would be the line that suggests that. Tunde, what else are we careful not to miss in this?
Yeah. So basically, to give everybody sort of like a rundown on top of what Charles just said, on the 27th, last Friday, Trump signed the bill for the stimulus, and immediately after that, Trump puts out a statement that essentially says he's not cooperating with any sort of oversight about the disbursement of the funds. And it's worth actually noting that the Republican version actually had Steve Mnuchin, or Mnuchin. How do you pronounce his name?
Yeah.
Mnuchin. There you go.
Pronounce it in the original Yiddish schmuck.
I'm gonna toss that over to Mark to pronounce. I don't know if I can knock that out. But Mnuchin is the Secretary of the Treasury for Trump, and in the Republican bill, it actually gave him unilateral authority to disperse the funds for the bailout for the business sector. And to keep the recipients secret for about 6 months. So imagine that. And the Democratic version, the version that passed, eliminated that clause and replaced it with some oversight provisions. And the provisions included things like the Congress gets to help select the executive director and the deputy executive director for the newly formed Pandemic Response Accountability Committee. And this is actually directly from Trump's statement. He says, accordingly, my administration will treat this provision as orderly but not mandatory. So long story short, he's basically like, yeah, we're not doing any of that shit. And then also it had a provision in this, the bill that ultimately got passed, that the Special Inspector General for Pandemic Recovery oversees the Department of Treasury, and more specifically, the Secretary of the Treasury, who's Stephen Mnuchin, when they do things like hand out loans. And the special inspector can request information from other government agencies and report to Congress if they don't actually comply with him, and he can do so immediately. And Trump's exact response to that was, I do not understand. And he's essentially saying that he's not going to cooperate that at all. And then they cite a lot in this, in his statement, the take care clause, which essentially is about the dispute. It's about the power of the president, and it can either point to a major source of presidential power, or point to some of the limitations of the presidential power. Anyways, the oversight language in the bill, in this bill that was passed, was basically the same as 2008. What got passed in 2008 for that stimulus package. And the issue isn't even that there's any sort of limitation on who can actually get the funds, right? It's basically just about the oversight. And even Trump hasn't even an issue with that, which speaks to sort of the crux of this whole issue, which is why would you need to hide where the funds are going if everything's on the up and up? And
I need to check in here to make sure that the audience is understanding. You're saying that in the last giveaway of over $1 trillion to large banks and corporations, we somehow were too tight-fisted with knowing what happened to the money. They've corrected that oversight from the Obama years, and now the money can flow like a river without anyone checking the temperature.
I tell you, the fact that Congress even wanted to look in on that is preposterous, right? Why would Congress want to be a check on what's going on with the funds, right? It seems perplexing to think. But the final bill also specifically bars Trump and his family and business from receiving any of the bailout funds. Although some of the provisions as far as some of the tax rules might end up benefiting them anyways, but you know what? I think I solved it. I get it, right? I get exactly what's going on here. You want big government when it comes to handing out $500 billion to corporations, but you want small government when it comes to knowing exactly where that $500 billion is going. So we get it. It's there in plain sight. You know, there's nothing wrong with this. Trump's doing everything on the up and up, and I'm sure those funds are going to find their way into hands of corporations that sorely need it. If anybody can't tell that I'm being sarcastic, then I don't know what to tell you.
Fair enough. Jacqueline, what do you have to add here?
Well, I mean, just the fact that Steve Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury, has complete oversight of who gets the money, how much they get, what they do with it, should tell everybody exactly who this bill was for. It was never for relief for citizens. On the one hand, it's like Trump can almost sort of say that, well, unlike the Obama administration, I helped bail out Main Street. But when you look at the nuts and bolts of the bill and how much money corporations got as opposed to people, then it's like, so, okay, you might as well not have that. That isn't even something you can say that makes any difference. But I think we have to understand that these people don't understand how regular people live, because Steve Mnuchin actually said that people should be able to live on $1,200 a month. And he said like for a couple of months. So this man knows that they're only giving a check one time for $1,200, a $1,200 check.
Well, is there any way we can make it so that he's forced to live on $1,200 a month and see how far that takes? I would love for that to happen for all of them. All of them. I want that to happen for the congressmen who knew about coronavirus and how damaging it would be to people's health. Yeah,
and made money on it.
And
made money on it.
Their stocks in January. Did anybody tell you and me that we should, adjust our 401k? But when this was coming, did anybody tell us that we should maybe make sure we have masks and gloves and hand sanitizer in January when they knew? So, I mean, the fact that there is anything for some people is, I think, a testament to the work of a few progressive, really tenacious Democratic congressmen. Nancy Pelosi did her job for once. I hate to give her credit, but okay, she did her job for once. Bernie Sanders actually, he did what he always does. He pushed for the people, and he actually wanted $2,400 every month until I think April or June.
Actually, Jacqueline, if I'm not mistaken, and I totally might be, the $2,400 did pass, except that applies to workers that are moving from a job to unemployment. So there's all kinds of gradations of who gets what, and he was fighting for $600 a week for anyone going on to unemployment right now.
Right. I mean, so there were all kinds of different ways that that the powers that be made sure that regular folks really did not get the relief that we need in this crisis. But the very companies that are laying people off, there are no guarantees for people to go back to work. But the very companies who are laying people off and cutting off their health insurance, by the way, they get all this money that they don't really have to account for. Most of it is grants. They don't have to pay most of it back. I mean, it's obscene.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'd like to run now this clip that helps illustrate how crazy things are. This is from the Real News story featuring Wendell Potter, the former healthcare insurance executive. Let's let it run now, Dwayne.
Is to make money under almost any circumstance. One thing that they're doing is they're requiring people to pay a lot of money out of their own pockets these days before their coverage kicks in. Most of us are in high deductible plans. In many cases, Americans have to pay thousands of dollars out of their own pockets before insurance companies will pay a dime. So the first dollars that would need to be paid for a hospital or to doctors for treatment come out of our own pockets, even with insurance. And that means that a high percentage of us now are underinsured. And most of us, quite frankly, don't have a lot of money in the bank to even cover our deductibles. The other is that because we don't really have an alternative, these companies know that if they do start having to pay more claims this year, what they will do next year, and they've already said they will do this in a conference call with financial analysts on Wall Street, they'll just increase their premiums next year significantly. The other thing that's important is that insurance companies know that because a lot of hospitals are canceling a lot of procedures that are not related to the pandemic, like knee replacements or anything that's not emergency related, those patients are not being admitted now, and in many cases are being released from the hospital to make way for COVID-19 patients. So as a result, a lot of the patients that insurance companies would have been paying for their treatment are not there now. And to the point that one of the CEOs of a big insurance company said that he can see that the insurance industry might have even a net savings this year.
So we're talking about the most brazen of the jackals in our economy. The folks that have made sure that Medicare for All can't pass or win a primary, and they're figuring out how to come out with more profits during the pandemic when everyone else is being asked to deal with a shrinking economy, emergency measures, people going above and beyond to help their neighbors, but not this useless health insurance industry. Jacqueline, do you have anything to add to this?
I think this whole crisis highlights a part of Bernie Sanders' platform that he made, or a cornerstone of his platform in 2016, and that is the need for Medicare for all. And the falsehood surrounding this policy is that private insurance wouldn't exist anymore. That's not true. In every country that Medicare or nationalized health services exist, there are private insurance companies that people can buy into. That's fine, but everyone should have access to basic health care, and no one should be making a profit off of whether people can afford to get medical care or not. I think I've said the word obscene so many times in the past few weeks, because there's no other way to look at the amount of money that healthcare corporations, which are basically the only companies other than Netflix, Amazon, Walmart, maybe, that are still making money in the stock market. That should not be so. But the very companies that are laying people off in order to protect people's health and safety are also cutting off their health insurance. So healthcare shouldn't be tied to employment. Healthcare is a human right. And I swear to God, I don't think anything highlights that any more than this situation and the perversity of the insurance companies making money off of this situation right now.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Mark, what were you going to say?
What? Nothing. I have nothing to say. No, I have a lot to say. I mean, I think going back to where Tunde even began, that Trump's made it very clear that he does not have to listen to the Inspector General, nor does he have to allow the Inspector General to tell Congress what he finds. So this could end up being a huge boondoggle, and the politics of this can get very sticky and messy. I think you're already seeing where tens of thousands of workers, hundreds of thousands of workers from the retail industry are being laid off. They're saying they're going to pay. Some of them say they're going to pay their salaries to May, some won't, and this is just going to tumble out. And it's the health insurance companies, as Wendell Potter was saying, are going to see this on the back end. They're going to say, okay, we're not going to, as Trump announced, we're not going to make you pay co-pays now, but wait. By the fall, you're going to be paying extra for your health insurance. You won't be able to afford anything because we're going to have to tack all this money on to pay for what we let you do this time. So the problem is, if the Democrats cannot find a way to really articulate this and push this in a real populist way, Trump could come out on top just because of perception. Who controls the platform? This is you're watching the fallout with coronavirus here and across the world, inching up authoritarianism, and this is all really dangerous stuff that's happening to us that we're not that we have to stay on top of. And I think that the first inkling is just you watch the battles over the Inspector General. They haven't even appointed the Inspector General yet, or say who they want to appoint to look at this $2.2 trillion. They're not talking about trying to bring out more money. They still won't have somebody looking over it. So that money they're sending people every month, these checks are supposed to come to some people, most people, many people in America. That's a one-time payment. And then what? And right now there are people across this country who are pushing for rent strikes, putting out white sheets saying we're not paying our rent. And that's going to be a growing movement. And what response will that get? And what publicity will that get? So this is the politics of Corona are just beginning.
Mark, I'd have to agree with you. So real quick, I think that's what makes this kind of thing so dangerous is that this is where it's buried, right? When we look to why our politics are the way they are, when we look to why in a few months or a few years, we're going to look back and be like, damn, how all those companies that didn't really need any sort of bailout get a bailout. We're going to look back to this and say, okay, well, this is the genesis of it, and nobody actually did anything about it, right? Congress just sat there like, I guess that's what he's going to do, And so I think this is why our politics are the way they are. And look, I went through Trump's entire statement. Look, I'm not the smartest person, but I know a couple of big words. But even I had a hard time kind of, reading through it and kind of understanding exactly what he was saying. And I think that's how they hide a lot of the things that they're trying to do, right? And it's I'm not saying anything revolutionary here, but I think it needs to be repeated consistently that this is how they do it, right? They chip away at things that we find as insignificant in the moment, and then later on realize, oh crap, that's why that's such a big deal. So I think that we need to start paying attention, and we need to start translating a lot better when we see things like this.
I mean, if you look at just look at the other fallout. I mean, Trump is rolling back all the protections around the environment, rolling back all the pollution protections, and making it very clear it's connected to Corona because he wants to get industry going. The only way to do that is to pull back on these regulations, pull back on the car regulations, on what factories can emit. And so there's a lot going to happen here because of this. And it's I think it will intensify the struggle in this country, and also in some ways make it more difficult.
Thank you, Mark. And I just want to add, for folks that saw the earlier clip with former healthcare executive Wendell Potter, he was being interviewed by correspondent Kim Brown on one of our shows at the Real News. You can check it out at therealnews.com, and you really should. For our next item, though, we are going to turn to democracy. Are we a democracy? Well, it looks like Trump isn't quite as excited about us being one as some other folks. There's a conversation about how we can have fair and free elections while it's so dangerous for folks to congregate in person, participating in the election process. He's actually against a rapid escalation of vote by mail and other measures that are meant to enable more people to participate in this special time. It's funny, he even let loose on some other story that he recognized that the easier it is to vote, the less likely it is that Republicans are going to win. Jacqueline, what else can you add here?
Other than this isn't new.
So what else is new? Right.
I mean, how many times have we talked about this though, hun? The fact that Republicans have never been like shy about how they know that they're intentionally committing voter suppression because they know that if they get fewer people to vote, if they can reduce the number of people who are voting, they have a better chance of winning. And because when people hear the Republican Party platform, most people are listening to it and going, "Oh, I don't want that." So why would you take a chance, right, in getting those and letting those people vote?
Well, I don't think it's just the Republicans. I think that this whole government has been anti-democratic. Whether it's during the DNC, I mean, we see how they handle how the DNC handles what we want, and they don't care what we want. So, I mean, even on that level, they don't respect democracy. They haven't respected democracy even where we live on the local level. Is the Democratic administration that overturned what we wanted when we wanted to give tipped employees a higher wage, $15 an hour.
Right.
They said we didn't know what we were talking about, that we're too stupid to know that we wanted that for other workers. So they just overturned what the general consensus of the people. I think this whole government give lip service to democracy, but they're the most anti-democratic.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about this particular comment from Trump is that he was criticizing the Democrats in trying to expand voting access, particularly for the November elections because of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, there was a lot of controversy in the last primaries that were held in Chicago and Arizona, where in Chicago, there was so many poll workers didn't show up that they had to consolidate and move polls. And one of the places they moved the polls was in a public housing building that was occupied, and the tenants were mostly senior citizens who were African American. Now, look, there is, I agree that people need to have access to the ballot. The access to the ballot should be unrestricted and unfettered. At the same time, you have to take people's health and safety into consideration when we're faced with something that most of us alive have not been faced with, and that is this pandemic. But when you have pretty clear direction from health officials and scientists that you really just need to stay the fuck away from people, to stay safe, I just don't. This idea that we don't know how to get paper ballots out to people is ridiculous. But also, Trump is just kind of telling the truth right here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if I could add this too, if I may, I mean, you have 11-year-olds coming up with apps for this, and I mean, we in a country like this, which gives all this lip service to the power of the vote and how voters matter, and our ancestors died for this and all this other kind of stuff. I mean, we are woefully behind a lot of other nations in the world when it comes to getting the population out to vote. There is no reason why in a nation such as this that has the resources that we have, there is no reason why we cannot come up with a more efficient, a much better way of getting people to vote. I mean, some countries have a national holiday just so everybody could come out and vote. And even with something that we're experiencing now with this pandemic, I mean, we can't better utilize technology in order to make sure that everybody has a chance to cast their vote, and it's more equitable because you don't have to worry about much disenfranchised parts of the country not being able to cast their ballot. I think that in this way, technology can be used to level the playing field all over.
Well, to be fair, weirdly enough, in this primary, we actually did try to use a bit of technology, right? And we
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
saw
Iowa.
what kind of sideward shift that caused. But Jacqueline, I kind of want to add to something that you said. You said Trump was telling the truth, and he absolutely was, right? What we can actually be grateful for Trump for at times is that he says the quiet parts out loud, right? So, when he went on Fox and Friends, and I think this is specifically exactly what he said. He said increased voter turnout would keep Republicans from getting elected. He also said levels of voting that if you ever agreed to it, you'd never have a Republican elected in this country. Look, he's right. Most times he's wrong, but every blue moon he's right. Higher turnout helps Democrats, and it does for a couple of reasons, right? So higher turnout means that there's more than likely going to be a demographic shift, right? That more people, more non-white voters are going to vote, as well as young voters, which generally break for the Democrats, and it's why, and that's specifically why voter suppression takes place, right? We have so many conversations about voter suppression. We're not even that far removed, right, from seeing some things like Brian Kemp down in Georgia, the governor down in Georgia. He had some emails that were famously leaked that essentially were him celebrating the success of the voter suppression in Georgia. And if you go issue by issue, right, Americans tend to lean towards a lot of the things that the Democrats at least should be advocating for, even if they don't always, like $15 minimum wage, like Medicare for all, college for all, taxing the rich. So yeah, Trump just if he does nothing, he does great marketing for the Democratic Party. They just are woeful and actually taking advantage of it. Although we are starting to see some of those ads that are actually just using his own words against him. They should just keep those on loop, on repeat. And every Democrat who's in the House and the Senate should be out on television, out on all of the cable networks to repeat everything that he's saying, because he's giving you all the ammunition you need.
I mean, the problem of the Democrats is that they are not on top of the digital world like the Republican Party is at all. And they're not, and they should be rolling out what you were saying here, Tunde. They should be rolling out all kinds of ads on television, just pushing back hard around voting rights, pushing back about what we should not allow during this coronavirus crisis that should be bringing us together. They should be pushing that. They're not stepping up their game at all. And I think that this plays into his hands, and who knows what he may try to do in the next several months, using coronavirus as a reason to set many more authoritarian things in shape in this country. People say, "Oh, Steiner, you're being very alarmist." Well, yeah, I am alarmed because it could happen, and you can't just let it happen, right? You can't just let it happen. And I think that's. Huh?
Let's move on to another broken part of our system here. Carrying on to our next segment, Mark, I wanted to talk to you about Biden and his arguments with reality. It looks as though a pandemic would be a good time to talk about how universal access to healthcare would be a good thing, and the behavior of health insurance companies as more evidence that relying on them to supply care is a bad thing. Biden apparently disagrees. Say more about that, Mark.
I don't know what. When I saw Joe Biden on this clip talking about healthcare and talking about the single-payer system, I was just, I was hoping I would say, Joe, why don't you just say something like, okay, I don't like single-payer, but I think now that we see we need a public option, or we need more controls in the healthcare industry. We have to ensure that everybody has access. But he's not doing that, and I think that it's the dangers of watching what's happening is watching him do this. The long-term danger is watching him lose to Trump.
Hold on. Let's play that clip so everyone's clued in on the insanity that's going on.
Because
Dwayne?
as you've been seeing, our healthcare system seems to be crumbling underneath this crisis. There is not enough. There's not enough support for the healthcare system. There's not enough support for the American people inside of the healthcare system. Are you now reconsidering your position when it comes to single-payer healthcare?
Single payer will not solve that at all. The thing that is needed is, for example, we have a whole number of hospitals that are being so stretched, including rural hospitals, they're going to need more financing. That doesn't come from a single payer system. That comes from the federal government stepping up and dealing with the concerns that they have, the reimbursement that they're going to get, how they're going to be able to move forward, and how they're going to be able to provide all the needed help that are needed in their communities. This is an opportunity to look at reconstructing the healthcare system in a way that, in fact, can respond more rapidly and more effectively to these kinds of crises, because it's going to come again. We should be spending, and we are spending, a great deal of time and effort finding a vaccine, finding a way that we can deal with preventing these diseases further down the road. But for example, we had people, when our administration, we had CDC people in other countries because we wanted to anticipate when, in fact, another virus would occur, when, in fact, a pandemic might occur as a consequence of a spreading virus in another country, to act quickly. President, we withdrew those people. I insisted that I didn't insist. I suggested that we should have people in China at the outset of this event. And when it all started in Wuhan province, and what happened? We did not insist that they go into the areas we wanted to. So I just, that's all I can do, is do what I know has to be done, say what I know has to be done.
So if you become...
I mean, when you watch him, I mean, you have to remember something about Biden. I mean, Biden is somebody who is tied into all the banking and pharmaceutical and health insurance industries. He always has been. He's always voted their way for the whole time in the U.S. Congress and the Senate. That's who he is. He may unfortunately be the candidate against Trump, and that's a whole nother discussion. But he's not going to change his tune. This tune is not going to change from him, and because he's incapable of that. Unfortunately, for the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Biden is a lying liar, and the truth is just not in that man. Can we just say it? He's a lie. This whole thing about hospitals aren't going to be helped with Medicare for all, and they're going to get their help from federal funding for what?
But what is it? If not, yeah, healthcare for all is federal funding, for God's sake.
That's what it is. I mean,
please.
That's what it is. The reason hospitals are struggling is because people can't pay their medical bills. And hospitals can't turn people away. Most the public hospitals can't and do not turn people away if they can't pay their bills. So they hound people for 20 years to pay these bills, but under a Medicare for all system, hospitals would get paid. Their bills would get paid, and people.
Jacqueline, we forget that there is a healthcare for all system in America. It's called the Veterans Hospitals.
Well,
that's a single payer system. That's single payer system.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
You don't have to worry about not getting treated or not having to be able to pay. The system is there for you, for the veterans of this country.
Right.
That's a single payer system. And it's working for the most part, except when it's not funded fully.
Exactly.
Right. But also, we can't fool ourselves into believing that Joe Biden and the rest of them who speaks like this doesn't know that, that a single payer plan would work. The fact is that we're never going to have them be on our side as long as there's so much money in politics, as long as our government has been hijacked by the lobbyists and the special interests and all that stuff. I think, Mark, like you said, and I agree with you totally, is that, he's always been in the back pockets or in the front pockets or in the wallets of all of these special interest
in the
groups.
Jacket pocket.
Right, and voted their way. We're under the we can't be under this illusion that somehow they're going to have this eureka moment that, oh wow, yeah, right, this would work. We'll never get them to admit that, because as long as there's so much money in politics, and that's the reason why we have to. I don't know how we're going to do it, but that's the reason why we have to get money out of this type of money out of politics.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to get money out of politics, but I think that at this point, we have to stop treating these establishment politicians as if they are coming from some sort of ideological standpoint. Exactly. They're not. Because if they were, like, that means that they're operating from a point of logic, right? So just take, for instance, the current scenario at hand. You have a pandemic. You've got this virus that's spreading like wildfire, and you've got people who are losing jobs at an unprecedented rate. Okay, that's where you start from. Now you decide to give them a stimulus, right? You say, hey, we're going to cut you a check. We're going to cut you a little bit. You give them $1,200 one time. Now, these are people who are getting sick and having to go to the hospital and having to pay thousands of dollars in medical bills. And you're only giving them $1,200. How does that system make sense to you? If the people don't have jobs anymore, they don't have money to pay for the medical service they're already they're going to be receiving because of the virus, and you're only giving them $1,200, where do you think the rest of the money is going to come from? Anybody with a functioning brain can look at that system and says that ain't going to work. That's not going to happen.
But you know what's even more insulting though? But you know what's even more insulting though is the fact that they believe that one-time check is going to keep us from going back to work. The Republicans and even some of the people I've heard on right-wing talk radio, they're saying, oh wow, we get that $1,200 check. Oh, that's just going to make us not want to go back to work because we got so much money in our pockets.
Yeah, well, that's how they see the world.
That extra $600 is just going to make us all a bunch of lazy people.
We're just going to kick back and drink.
High on the log with that.
That's the lens that they view the world on.
Iced tea and just tell the boss to go fuck off. Malt liquor, yeah. Just tell the boss to go, fuck off because hey, I got my $600.
Yeah, right. If you look at what they're doing, like let's say in Denmark and even Britain, the government is paying 75 to 80% guaranteeing of the salaries of people who can't work, and telling their companies they have to pay the rest. I mean, we're not the kind of social democratic societies of Northern Europe are actually answering this in a much better way than this country ever could, all right? Because our system just doesn't allow it to happen. And the question is though, really what happens in the end here. Even though Biden is not my favorite politician on the planet, I have what he's voted for, what he's done, his racist comments around the crime bill, all his votes around banking, all the stuff he's done. We're still faced with Donald Trump.
Mark, we have a commenter on YouTube who wanted to chime in here. Dwayne, show us what they're telling us. Turns out we forgot another universal healthcare program in America. That's the healthcare for Congress and the U.S. government, and it's true.
Yeah, touche.
That's true. Touche.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know so much about the U.S. government. I mean, the government
Congress
employees,
definitely.
Congress has an incredible healthcare system for their families and people who are elected.
And they would all be sweating bullets if you ever decided to, we're gonna pause that for a second. They even though they all are paid handsomely, they'd all sweat bullets if you ever dared told them, hey, I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on this month. Things are looking a little shaky. We might have to cut back on this healthcare for you guys. Oh, you'd have a bill passed so fast. I'm not sure that Sonic could keep up with how fast they try to pass a bill to stop that from happening.
Oh my God, we'd have to go to the doctors with the pores? No.
Not us.
This was good. I think we've helped illuminate yet another dark corner of what's terrible today. Moving on to something I dare say is even worse. Dwayne, why don't you start us off with that video clip?
With each other. Do you think that using the phrase Chinese virus is... I think what the president was saying is that's where it started. I'm married to an Asian.
This is why you have a virus.
Hi, I'm so sorry, but I think that was a very racist comment.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Wow, great. I said you dropped your coronavirus.
A person at the White House used the term Kung flu. My question is, do you think that's wrong, Kung flu? And do you think using the term Chinese virus, that puts Asian Americans at risk, that people might target them?
No. I think they probably
would agree with it 100%.
So that was a clip from our story about the rise of anti-Chinese racism and xenophobia in general in the wake of the pandemic, led, of course, by our xenophobe in chief, Donald Trump. That's a story you can find on our website, therealnews.com. It's by Eddie Conway, and it's a great but depressing story. And Jacqueline, I want to turn to you. What can we say about this? It seems bizarre. Why would there be anti-Chinese racism today? Aren't we past that?
Why'd you ask me that? Why'd you ask me that question?
I'm playing it straight hand here in so many ways. But yeah, go ahead.
Jacqueline, there's no anti-Chinese racism.
No, just like there's no anti-Black racism and there's no anti-LGBTQIA.
Trump is an open man. He's from New York. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, the whole, it bothers me that people are shocked at how racist Americans are. I'm always shocked at how shocked people are when our so-called leaders and spew these racist tropes, and millions of Americans agree with it. I mean, you have to understand this anti-Chinese sentiment was spun into the narrative of the spread of this pandemic in this country from the very beginning, even ignoring the actual timeline of how the virus spread. China has been accused of lying about the number of people who have died. They were accused of being, a brutal authoritarian regime when they implemented very harsh quarantine measures, closing borders. In some cases, people were violating the curfew and the quarantine order, and the police were literally dragging a few people back to their apartments and locking them in. And to us, that seems, very brutal and authoritarian. But the Chinese government was dealing with a viral outbreak that they had just identified as not pneumonia, right? Because in December, the Chinese Health Commission did notify the World Health Organization that there was an outbreak of something that they thought was pneumonia in Wuhan province. World Health Organization knew in December. So if the World Health Organization knew, the United States government knew. So China was not withholding information. There were certainly things they could have done differently. Maybe they could have implemented quarantines faster if they knew at the beginning that what they were dealing with was not pneumonia, but it was a new virus. It was a novel virus. So I think there are some criticisms that can be that can be valid, but at the same time, blaming China for the outbreak going global and for the United States' crappy response to the outbreak in this country is just typical U.S. imperialistic, anti-Chinese, anti-communist, anti-socialist propaganda. And it fits right into anti-Black racism and oppression of all other people who don't fit into this nice, neat American imperialist or American exceptionalist ideology.
Jacqueline, I understand what you're saying, but a few things come to mind. One is when the outbreak was new in China, it was widely reported that the authorities were doing a lot of what they can do, and that's quite a bit, to suppress open conversation about the new disease on social media. There was even a citizen journalist arrested in China not long after it all started in the city of Wuhan, where he went to cover it. They were much more open about it after it became clear the scale of the problem, and after the authorities were convinced that by showcasing what they had done, that they could make it look like a success story. But those measures to keep their own people in the dark originally, that was not a good model right there.
But actually, that's not true that they kept their own people in the dark, because the Wuhan Health Commission posted a notice on their public website about the outbreak of pneumonia in Wuhan. It was on a public website. CNN has a link to the website on their own timeline that American journalists continue to ignore like it never happened. So, and at the same time, they also reported, and at the time, this was December 21st or something like that. At the same time, the Chinese Health Commission reported that outbreak, which they didn't know what it was. They thought it was pneumonia, and they began testing. They also reported that to the World Health Organization.
But Jacqueline, you're doing. Hold on a second, Mark. You're moving the goalpost a little. The question was not whether or not China informed WHO or whether or not the Chinese authorities admitted that they had a problem. One of the questions that this relates to is whether or not Chinese people talking on social media about how the issue affects them or about deficiencies that they notice regarding how medical care is delivered or what resources exist, those things are being suppressed by the Chinese government in a way that sort of doesn't make sense. And an example of this would be they were excluding the people who had the COVID-19, but who didn't display symptoms from their tally of folks who are catching the disease. And that's an example of a kind of sleight of hand statistically that makes no sense for them to be doing these days.
But how is that any different from what the United States is doing right now?
Not
how is this country pointing to China and saying, oh my God, they're so evil because they didn't include people who were asymptomatic in their tallies? I mean, if people are asymptomatic, I mean, and they didn't know for maybe 30 days while they were testing that first group of people who they identified as having something, that it was COVID-19. And by then, all kinds of people had gone in and out of that area. So how is this country that is actively denying care, even for testing for people, just in general in this country, looking at China dealing with an outbreak of a new kind of virus and saying they are a particular kind of evil?
Well, but except let me just, you can't.
And hold on. And in fact, saying that the reason we're having the problems we're having here is because it's their fault. That, to me, is the kind of white supremacist sleight of hand that changes the discussion from what are we doing in this country with officials who knew about this outbreak when it was identified in late December, early January. See, because that's the problem here. We spend so much time demonizing what China did and didn't do, how they treated their citizens, what they did on social media with their citizens. But at the same time, in this country, our elected officials knew that the outbreak had already expanded in January, and they did nothing to protect us. But what they did was pivot and turn the attention on the evil Chinese government, the awful authoritarian Chinese government. And for an entire month, from the month of January to about mid-February, before the first cases of COVID-19 showed up here on this company and people in this country and people started to die, most of the media attention on China was about how authoritarian their quarantines were, how backward they were in their policies, how brutal their crackdowns were. But there has been no reckoning in this country about the lack of response that our own elected officials, who knew that the virus was on its way here, actually was already here, who knew that the virus was here, that wasn't talked about.
Well, I think just jump for a second. I think we're mixing some things up here. I mean, on the one hand, I'm not going to defend China. China is an authoritarian capitalist nation that I will not defend. And they do clamp down on citizens. They did clamp down on social media. That absolutely happened. On the other hand, what's happening here, anti-Chinese racism in America has a huge, long history. I mean, it's hundreds of years old in this country. And and Trump just pushed it and spewed it out, the Chinese virus, the Wuhan virus. And I think that people have felt it. You feel it in campuses where Chinese students are. You feel it all over the country. And I think that is something that has to be dealt with. And this administration constantly pushes their racist ideologies and constantly pushes racism, their racism to the forefront for everyone. And I think when you look at what happened in the United States in January, when things could have been done, part of it has to do with the insanity of who has power in Washington right now. I mean, think about this for a minute. I mean, it's when you have these crypto nuts, these white nationalist crazies who are part of the White House, who are part of the federal government, who have all these conspiracy theories about where this comes from and why not to pay attention to it, and push people who were experts to the background until Trump was forced to allow them in. It was too much that they could have done to reclamp down this country and control the virus, which they did not do. There's all kinds of arguments now whether they have the wherewithal to control it. I mean, places like South Korea. South Korea did 10,000 tests a day. Little South Korea, 10,000 tests a day, producing masks, producing things to protect their people, which is why they flattened the curve in South Korea. So, you know,
Mark, if I could just hop in here. I'm enjoying watching the debate before everybody. I was tempted to go get some popcorn real quick to see some more sparks fly. But I think that no matter what we talk about from, okay, well, this is the timeline that happened in China, or this is what they did or didn't do as a response to it. I think all of that is ignoring at least the part of the story that I find most pressing, which is the xenophobia and the racism that we find in ourselves, right? That Trump, he's going to say what he's going to say, and he's going to spit the things that he's going to spit, and his base is going to eat it up. They don't need much to get them riled up, right? So we know that's going to happen. But some of the things that I'm seeing online are just coming from people who you would consider as just ordinary, everyday people, right? That you wouldn't necessarily look at them as xenophobic or any of this, right? But some of the things that they're saying absolutely are. And I think that we need to stop looking at everybody else and saying, oh man, everybody else is racist or everybody else is this or that, and start looking at ourselves about what judgments that we're individually making as citizens to any other sort of, any sort of demographic that there is. And what I would say to some of those people who are, making comments online, or at least we just saw those clips of it was people talking to people. And what I would say to those people is that, trust me when I say it's only a matter of time before they come for you. You think that you're immune to it. You think that it doesn't apply to you, but there is something about you that is going to be singled out, and people are going to destroy you for it. And it's not going to be your fault. You didn't have anything to do with it. And yet people are going to persecute you for it. And it's only a matter of time before it happens. So before you make that comment to somebody driving their car, before you make that comment to somebody just walking down the street, before you make that comment online, think about yourself and think if, and I think it pains me to see that, because it's such a cliched thing, but do unto others as you would have done unto yourself, right? I don't think enough people live by that model, because some of the things you say to people, you certainly would be hurt if they said that to you, or you certainly would be hurt if people acted that way to you. So I think that no matter,
part of it is because the racism in this country, I mean, in the world, is part of the social political DNA of America. It's inside people. It's in people's unconscious minds, and then when things erupt, it becomes part of people's conscious thought, and they begin acting out on that. I mean, racism is deep. It's not just something that, it's not just about people thinking about themselves and brotherhood. This is how America has run this country for hundreds of years.
Right, but the point that I'm making, Mark, is that we tend to just look at that. As citizens, we tend to just look at that from a policy angle, from looking at our policy.
I'm not talking about policy.
Fair enough. You're not talking about policy, but you're talking about looking outside of yourself. I'm talking about looking at yourself, not just a kumbaya, let's just all get along, but when you make these racist remarks, when you look at people and something happens in some other place, and then you have people who are of a certain descent or whatever the case is, and you start persecuting them. I'm talking about the people who are actually making those comments, the people who are actually saying these things. Look within yourself and think about the things that you're actually saying, and know that it's coming for you one day. It's not just this thing that's just this lollipop in the sky. Everything, all the skies are going to be blue for me always. No, it's going to happen to you eventually. That eventually something is going to happen where you're going to be something about you is going to be brought to light, or something about your heritage is going to be brought to light, and then all of a sudden you're having to deal with racist comments, and you're left wondering, how did this happen? Well, it's because you didn't decide to stick up for people when they were receiving these comments. And I'm not trying to step on what you're saying, Mark, but I think that we as individuals need to start doing some soul searching and to start
I would argue here, without getting too deep into it, I mean, look, I spent decades inside of groups wrestling with racism and getting people to wrestle with their racism as individuals. That's part of the discussions you have with people, to realize what you do and the actions you take, whether they're anti-Semitic, they're racist, they're misogynist, and understand why they are and how to stop being that way and how to wrestle with that so you change your behavior. But the reality is that until you really change the nature of society and change how racist this place is and why we are such a racist society, where that comes from, it's not going to, you have to keep addressing that. You can't just make it, you can't just think about what you said. It has to be, okay, yes, you have to do that, but you've got to really say, look, what Trump said about this virus being a Chinese virus was racist and foments racism in America and brings that out in people. That has to be addressed. You know,
right.
Here's
no. We're ending it. Thank you very much. That was a great spirited discussion. We're moving on. Just a reminder, you're watching Stir Crazy, a show on the Real News Network. We survive because of the generosity of viewers and donors like yourself. So just one small request before we play our pitch for you. Smash that donate button. Dwayne, the pitch.
Hi, my name is Kayla Rivara, and I'm the Chief of Staff here at the Real News. We're in our spring fundraising campaign, and we need to raise $50,000. Every dollar will be matched, and we can't do it without you. So please go to therealnews.com and click the donate button. Thank you.
So please kindly do what Kayla asked you to do. Thank you very much. And now for the most fun part of our show. That's where we touch on topics that a little bit sideways to the news of the day. Mark, kindly tell us why Britney Spears is making headlines right now.
Why? What is?
Why Britney Spears is making headlines.
Everybody wants to talk about sex and Corona.
No, but
what do you do?
Sorry, we're on Britney Spears here. Is this not the story that you?
Britney Spears is first of all, I didn't even know that Britney Spears was even like this. As soon as I saw this pop up on the news, I wrote to my daughters and went, I didn't know this stuff. I had no idea that Britney Spears was on the left, that she's talking about socialism, that she's saying we should diversify income, redistribute wealth, that kind of blew my mind. Did you know that about Britney Spears?
You know, I assume that all intelligent thinking adults will eventually understand the supreme injustice of our capitalist neoliberal system. So
that's a dangerous, yeah, right.
Sure, Charles. Sure.
Yeah, right. That's going to happen tomorrow morning. But no, I'm happy that Britney said what she said. I had no idea that she even thought that way. Who knew? I didn't know. Maybe Tunde knew. Maybe Jacqueline knew. I didn't know.
She's suffering from the oppression of having all of her wealth tied up in a conservatorship that is making it impossible for her to make her own financial decisions. Now, there may not have been some issues that created that situation, and we're not going to play that clip. Definitely not.
Why not?
It's worth thinking. It's worth thinking about that as we are on the barricades advocating for overthrowing the 1%, that maybe Britney Spears is on our side, at least until she gets that conservatorship gone.
Well, I think the question is, does it matter? And I guess I'll pose the question to all of you: is what do you guys think? Does it, I kind of saw headlines like this, and I have my own sort of thoughts about if it actually matters or not. But I'm very curious as to what everybody else's take is. Do you guys think it matters?
I think for people like me, who is a socialist, and who are very committed to, pursuing socialist goals, yeah, it matters because, we're like, how much are you really into understanding what this means and furthering this fight? I mean, the thing I think that matters is how much are you really into furthering these goals that you claim you talk about? Because I think we're in a moment where people believe that posting on social media is activism, and okay, that's sharing information, but that's not the revolution. So, but on the other hand, I always like to remember what Kwame Ture said, that the job of the conscious is to make the unconscious aware of their unconscious actions. My job is not to make you think like me. My job is to help you realize that you're thinking in a way that doesn't jibe with how things really work. And what you do with that is up to you. If I give you enough information, then you'll go where you naturally should, toward equity and justice. So it's like a 50-50 thing for me. It's like, yay, she got more people talking about Lenin and Marx and communism and socialism, but I'm wondering what else there's going to be after that.
Elizabeth Warren, I'm sure.
That's not. Mark. Okay, I give up.
Well, Charles. Okay. Yeah. So I think this opens the opportunity, though. Like Jacqueline, I agree with everything you said, and you pretty much just took all the words out of my mouth. But as we're sitting here talking about it, I think this can open up some potentially branding opportunities for anybody on the progressive side. So the next time you go to like the DNC, the convention, or anything like that, you have a nice branding opportunity. It's socialism, bitch. Playing off the whole it's Britney, bitch. Motif. I think that'll look good on a bumper sticker, on a shirt. There's some merchandising opportunity with this with this course of action.
Actually, my daughter posted a really great T-shirt. One of my daughters, which was that all these women are wearing "Capitalism is the virus."
Nice.
I like that.
And on that note, we'll end with the fond wish to nationalize industry just one more time. And moving on to our next story, I'm not sure which of you to go to for these stories, but we're all looking together about how some people are taking advantage of this lockdown and social isolation to, bang a little bit more than they were before. So my question for all of our hosts today is, do we think they're having enough? The percentages for more seemed suspiciously low, and I'm having thoughts about that.
Well, I don't trust people who kind of look at this stuff and ask people what their private lives are. I think a lot more is going on right now, and I think people who are in monogamous relationships, living together, are in much better shape than the rest of you, because we don't have to worry about it so much. I mean, because if you sleep with somebody.
Wait a minute.
And they're on the same bed all the time.
Mark, that sounded very accusatorial. That sounded.
What?
You said the rest. You said the rest of us, as if you're already judging what our situations are.
I'm not judging a situation. I know. Well, here's what I know. I know that the two of us on this panel at least live with somebody, and we're in a monogamous relationship. And so that gives us an advantage. Maybe the rest of you aren't there. Maybe you are. I don't know. I don't go inside your house. I have no idea. I'm just saying that, as long as you don't.
I'll show you right now, Mark.
But please, not now. There's a lot of room on the edge. But I mean, it's
I'm just going to point out here that my cat is usually very.
We don't want to know about this, Charles. You and your cat.
Talked about monogamous relationships. And,
Look, I heard my cat, and I immediately broke out into a cold sweat. I don't know. I didn't know what was happening.
It's cuddles all the way down. Don't worry.
Dangerous waters.
I did not want to know where that was going.
There's a cat below me and a dog to my right.
Jeez. All right, let's stop talking about cats. All right, all I can really say about this is I don't know. I got to look at the numbers on this because according to what I'm hearing, it's actually the opposite. For this very anecdotal, people that I talk to say that is actually the opposite effect, where you're actually starting to get more into the other side of the relationship versus anything about sex or anything like that. Not that that's not fun, and that's definitely a way to pass the time, but it's more about you have so much time to now talk to each other, to now understand each other a lot more. And I feel like that's like the thing that's happening that didn't really necessarily happen before is that now you're forced to stay in the house with each other. Now you actually have to communicate or not. You could just do your own thing.
Isn't that a double-edged sword?
It very much is. Yeah. We might see a historic rise in divorces, breakups as soon as all this lifts. We'll
see. If there's a corona bump in births, we'll know something happened.
There will be a corona bump in births because there is now projected to be a shortage of condoms.
Oh God, yeah, yeah. A lot of quarantine babies is definitely going to be trending soon. Yeah,
I mean, the thing it's funny because relationships are different when you're older, right? My husband and I are in our 50s. I'm 52. He's 53. I got him to come on because I knew that when he came home, he was going to go to bed. He's tired. So, because he drives a truck all day. And he's out early in the morning. So during the week, there's not a whole lot of frisky going on. On a regular, it's just not because he's tired. I'm tired. It's just not. I'm sorry. It's like
the stars just on the line. We get it. Yeah.
It's not like all of the time, and it's not like the novelty wears off. It's just you do get older. You do focus on different things, and when you're kind of forced to stay in the same place together all of the time, you do find out different dimensions of this person that you're living with. Some stuff you gotta, you find out that you don't like, that you got to figure out, am I going to stab him over this today? Or
whoa. We post this publicly. Jacqueline. Hold on.
Now that we've moved from sex to stabbing, I think that's a good time that we can kind of wrap things up. I don't want to find out what would happen to our next topic. But we're interested to know what everyone out there would like us to focus on. I think we're going to be up tomorrow. We're going to continue this stir crazy show routine. Please don't forget that we depend on your support to exist as a network. And thank you so much. And thank you to our hosts.
Sorry, Charles, before you're going to hate me for it. I know you're going to hate me for it, but if I could chime in. I don't know if there's a way, can we do like a poll of our viewers to see sort of, where they lie on that sort of more sex, less sex happening spectrum? I don't know if we can get a consensus out there. So I don't know if we can do that after the show, maybe put that out. I just want to throw that in.
We absolutely can. In fact, everyone listening to this, just know that what you should do is respond to us on Twitter with our handle is, of course, The Real News. Please give your answer in the form of an emoji. And the question is, sex or stabbing? Where are you right now in your relationship?
What end of the spectrum? I love it.
I'm not answering that. Thank you. And yes, we'll figure out some online polling on that. Thank you all so much. And I'm just reciting your names. Jacqueline, Tunde, Marc. It was a blast. Thank you. See you next time.
Next time.
Hello, I'm Gerald Dent.
And I'm Marc Steiner.
We here at The Real News.
And we're here to talk to you about the future of the Real News.
We are in dire need of $50,000.
And you can make that happen for all of us and for yourselves.
So go to donate.
And make a pledge now to the Real News and let us keep growing the news you love to watch.
Pretty please.
Thank you.